Welcome to the UFC Fight Night, Poirier versus Hooker DFS strategy show. Of course, that is the fighter, Pete Rogers Jr. Of course, I'm the reporter, Jason Floyd. And of course, we are sponsored by SuperDraft. Going to tell you about the great offer SuperDraft has for everyone here later on in the show. Of course, over the next hour or so, we will be breaking down the slate for Saturday's UFC Fight Night, Poirier versus Hooker. But Pete, let's start off last week. Last Thursday we were talking about Curtis Blaydes didn't get the finish, but man, if you paid up for Curtis Blaydes, you're extremely happy with 143 points.
Yeah, finish or not, I don't know how you can complain about 140 points. I mean, that's just crazy. He put on a clinic in there, and that's basically what we kind of expected. A lot of takedowns. We thought he'd potentially get a finish, but you never know in MMA. And Volkov was super tough. But, last week, mediocre week, a lot of craziness happened. Camacho didn't come through for us. But, I think that was across the industry. I think that was the free square across the industry. So, things like that happen in the sport of MMA. But 9 times out of 10, you side with Camacho in that situation.
It's one of those DFS lessons that we learned several times, but it seems like we always forget it. Don't put all your shares in one fighter. I mean, thankfully I had about 3 lineups that did not have Frank Camacho in there. So I did cash last week, but those things happen, but it's great. We're right back to it. Of course, anyone wants to leave a question, do that right there in the YouTube chat. Of course, be sure to hit that thumbs up. That helps us out a lot as well. Of course, if this is your first time watching or listening to us, what we do is we break down the fights top to bottom. We start with the main event, work all the way down, and we'll sprinkle in your questions as we go forward. But Pete, the main event is Dustin Poirier versus Dan Hooker. Dustin Poirier, 8,700 on DK, $22 on FanDuel, 1.1 times on SuperDraft. And over for Dan Hooker, he's 1.45 times on SuperDraft, $18 on FanDuel, and 7,500 on DK. I mean, I think that first off, I think when I look at the Dustin Poirier side, when this guy wins, in terms of DFS, typically it's a 100-point performance. But I think one of the questions I have is, how does he rebound from the loss against Khabib Nurmagomedov?
It's a great question. And, I've been a fan of Dustin Poirier since he first came into the UFC. And, not many people knew who he was. And ever since, he's really taken out some big names in the sport. His strength of schedule is unlike any other. He's really, beaten a lot of top talent. He's been beaten by some elite level fighters, but he's rebounded very nicely. And this week he's looking to do the same. Rebound after that recent loss to Khabib Nurmagomedov up against Dan Hooker. And it's a tough matchup, and it's a very tough matchup because both these guys finish fights, and between them they have over 30 finishes. So it's going to be an exciting fight. Dustin Poirier's one of the best boxers in all of MMA. He's a good southpaw, puts combinations together great, has great volume. And, if he wins even by decision, he tends to score really well because of, the accumulation of significant strikes. And then you take into consideration his strength of schedule, and it's almost like it's going to be, a walk in the park for Poirier, but, not so fast. Dan Hooker's very, very dangerous.
Cameron in the chat already asking a question about this one. He goes, is fading the main event crazy on this card?
Yes.
And I was going to bring this up when we talk about the next fight. Basically, when we're talking optimal lineup and we say the favorite wins in the main event, co-main event, is only one of the 2 fighters in the optimal lineup.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't see how you fade the main event. I mean, if you want to be super contrarian, but you have 5 rounds to work with. Both these guys are elite strikers. Dustin Poirier does have some takedowns in his back pocket if he wants to resort to them, if he's getting lit up on the feet. But they're both good on the ground as well. Great submissions. Anytime a fight is going to be a striking match and it's going to be on the feet for 5 rounds, I want a piece of that. I don't want to avoid it. So I won't be avoiding the main event in most of my lineups, maybe one just because, but I'm excited for the matchup for sure.
Scott says, so Poirier and Hooker in cash?
It's an interesting point. I mean, it depends on if it goes the distance. If it goes the distance, then, that strategy could work. Hooker at 7,500 is crazy value. Dustin Poirier, he's beaten some really, really talented fighters in the UFC. And Dan Hooker's really looking for that first big, big name. And maybe Dustin Poirier's it. I mean, he just beat Paul Felder, but that was a questionably close fight. You could argue that it was Felder's fight, but I think Hooker's looking to grab a win over a big name. Obviously the Gilbert Burns fight, and then the win over him aged really well, but that was some time ago. I think Hooker's going to give some problems to Poirier, and I can't make a stand one way or another for either fighter. I'll be leaning a little bit more towards Hooker, believe it or not, based on roster construction at 7,500 and just paying up for some of the expensive fighters that I like.
Yeah, I'll have more shares of Dustin Poirier than I will Dan Hooker. I think you can't fade the main event just because even if this fight goes 25 minutes, the losing fighter could still get you a good score. Now, what concerns me, if you want to be a Dan Hooker backer in this one, is I believe if you look at his fights that have gone later on, and particularly look at the Paul Felder fight, he did slow down in the fourth and fifth round. So that does kind of concern me. CS Yates says, pretty even in the main event, leaning either way. You tell me I got to pick one side or the other. Like and I know people want to hear what our picks are. Taking the DFS side of it, you tell me I got to pick the winner in the fight. I'm picking Dustin Poirier because he's been in these spots. The only concern would be is how does he bounce back from Khabib? But to me, I think Poirier is a smart play. But and I believe if you're a single lineup type player, I think you got to look at Dustin Poirier's got to be the guy you really look at. But if you're a multiple lineup player like we are, you got to have shares of both guys.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think Poirier is the safer play for sure. I mean, his resume speaks for itself. The guy has great talent, good defensive ability, striking wise as well. I mean, every now and then he gets wobbled and cracked. The thing with Dan Hooker is, his toughness, and he's very tough, but he does take a lot of damage and he does absorb a lot of strikes. If you look back on the Edson Barboza fight, everybody's going to point to that by the leg kicks and the accumulation of body work that Barboza put on him. He was still standing for the majority of it. I know that he was basically a punching bag, but he's so tough and he didn't want to quit until basically his body shut down. Now, Dan Hooker has a significant height advantage over Dustin Poirier and a 3-inch reach advantage. So for Dan Hooker, despite the small cage, he's still going to look to keep it at range, and he needs to work on his straight punches, his front kicks, his straight kicks, and also his amazing knees. He has possibly the best knees in all of MMA, right up the middle. Him, James Krause, those are guys that I think of have some sneaky, sneaky knees. And if you're bobbing your head or you're shooting for a takedown, you could run into him. And if you think about it, Dustin Poirier really has a good boxing background, so he does roll a lot, and maybe he rolls into one of those knees. Like you said, the safer play is Poirier for sure. For DFS, I'm probably going to be about 55% Hooker, 45% Poirier, just based on lineup construction, like I said before. I can't wait for the fight. I'm a striker, so I love this matchup.
On the SuperDraft side of things, I mean, if you think Dan Hooker can pull this thing off, it just, as a regular, he's 1.45 times. If you want to put him in the captain spot, 2.2 times. So if you think he can pull it off, there's some great numbers there. I mean, look, and we talk about this every week of how the DraftKings and FanDuel numbers can be not similar at all. And this is one of those fights. You look at Dustin Poirier, 8,700, 7,500 for Dan Hooker. But then on FanDuel, it's $22 for Poirier, $18 for Hooker.
Yeah, it's crazy how somehow there's disparities, across the industry on certain fights, and this is one of them. On FanDuel, you see that they favor strikers more, so maybe that's why they up the salary for both fighters. The one thing that's making me a little nervous about Dustin Poirier is not a lot of people are talking about is he's coming off a major, hip reconstruction where they had to go in and fix a bunch of things and some problems in his femur as well. So he basically didn't get medically cleared till March. And this is his first fight back from the Khabib fight, first fight back from major surgery. Obviously, he made it through the whole camp, and he's been training hard with Jorge Masvidal and, Louise Pena down in American Top Team. But you wonder how much that took a toll on his body, the surgery and being out for a little bit and having to sit on the sidelines. And then you also bring into when he did lose to Khabib, it did seem like he was starting to talk about retirement. So those are two factors that I kind of take into consideration where I'm going to lean a little bit towards Hooker. But, obviously I will be rooting for Dustin Poirier. I love his style, and I really, really, just am excited for this matchup.
Arturo asking us if we can go over our picks after we finish up. Yes, we will definitely do that. We'll let you know all of our picks, for the fights. Cameron asking, saying, Petey's loving the new chart columns. Of course, that is something you can check out right there at awesemo.com under the MMA section. He asked about, who are our best underdog options. We'll answer that question kind of throughout the show as we break down the fights, so that'll definitely be coming up here, and should be noted right now on the betting odds. Dustin Poirier minus 230, plus 190 for Dan Hooker. And when you look at if in terms of a fighter winning inside the distance, Dan Hooker plus 275, Dustin Poirier minus 115.
Yeah, and on paper, I think Dustin Poirier looks like it's going to go in there and he's going to get it done quickly. But we have seen Dustin Poirier struggle in the past. We have seen Dan Hooker struggle in the past. They both have losses in the UFC. In the UFC, Dustin Poirier is 17-5-1. Dan Hooker's 10-4. But in those wins, you got to think of strength of schedule. And 17-5 for Dustin Poirier, fighting Max Holloway, Justin Gaethje, Eddie Alvarez, Khabib Nurmagomedov, Conor McGregor. You know what I'm saying? Like, the list goes on and on. He has an incredible resume. I can't wait for the fight. I don't think he could go wrong. Do not fade the main event. Just sit back and enjoy the show.
Moving on down to the co-main event, it is Mike Perry versus Mickey Gall. Mickey Gall, 7,200 on DK, $13 on FanDuel, 1.55 times on SuperDraft for Mike Perry. He's 1 times on SuperDraft, $20 on FanDuel, and 9,000 on DraftKings. There's obviously been a lot of, I have gotten more questions this week about Mike Perry than any other fighter, and they're all pretty much the same question. Like, Chase asked me on Twitter earlier today. He goes, thoughts on Mike Perry having only his girlfriend in his corner. Love the guy as a fan. I think he wins the fight. Guy's off his rocker though. Okay, let's get the fighter perspective on this. What is your thought about Mike Perry only having his girlfriend in his corner?
All right, so this is like unfamiliar territory for us. We've never really had to deal with this type of situation where the guy doesn't know his weight. He's like, I don't know. I'll know when I wake up in the morning. I'm going to have my girlfriend corner me, and I'm not going to have any coaches this entire training camp. So, oh, man, this guy's talking crazy, but he is skilled. I don't care what he says verbally. He's very skilled. And I have seen on his social media that he is training with some good wrestlers, some good grapplers. So he may just be doing it to get attention on the sport, and he's very, very good at marketing himself as a crazy wild man. And I think that's why people want to tune into the fight. Will he beat Mickey Gall with no coaches and his girlfriend in the corner? You know what I'm saying? Obviously, it's not the smart thing to do. You need advice when you're in there. And if things aren't going your way, it's a very dark and lonely place. And that's why your coaches are there to pick you up and give you guidance. Now, maybe she's, more accredited than we know. He has said that she's, wrestled in high school and, used to do karate or whatever she used to do. But she's not an expert, and you need experts in your corner to help you. But I think the problem is if Mike Perry had Trevor Whitman in his corner, right? Does he really even listen to him? Like, is he that type of guy that just ignores everybody and he's going to do what he's going to do? And I think that might be the case here. Mike Perry is an underrated grappler and does well enough to survive. So I think that he can, last through Mickey Gall's attempts of getting him to the mat. I think he can defend the takedowns, defend the submissions, and potentially, knock out Mickey Gall because he does have the striking advantage and it's not close.
How does Mickey Gall? Because look, Mickey's got to get the fight to the ground to win. I think we all understand that. So how does he get the fight to the ground? I mean, that to me is the biggest question mark because, when you think of Mickey Gall, you don't think, takedown specialist. I mean, I would imagine single leg would be the path. Yeah. But I think the question is, can he get inside enough to get that takedown?
Yeah, so it's not a grappling match, and it's an MMA fight. So Mike Perry, if you've ever seen him fight, he's going to be throwing heat at his opponent. Even training partners, I watch him spar, and it's like, dude, you end up knocking this guy out in training or something because he just aggravates you because he has no control at all. And in fights he goes crazy. But if you look back at the Ali Aquinta Mike Perry grappling match, Ali Aquinta had a lot of success taking him to the mat with single leg takedowns. Wasn't able to do much with him, wasn't able to, submit him at all. And Mike Perry actually won the match by escape time and actually got back to his feet and reversed some positions and survived and did pretty good. So the grappling's there. Like he knows what to do. He's just an idiot. And that's the truth. And Mike Perry in this situation needs to defend the takedowns and win the fight standing up. Mickey Gall is going to be looking for those single legs, just like Ali Quinta did, because he's not really a wrestler. So he doesn't have great takedown attempts. He tries to lace the leg like jiu-jitsu sweeps and trips and all that stuff against the cage. But I think that Mike Perry is just going to be too big and too strong.
If I say Dustin Poirier is the chalk of the card in terms of DFS GPP, is Mike Perry number 2?
Yeah, he might be right there, man. I think that we could talk about 3 chalky players, and it's probably going to be Poirier, Mike Perry, and then Sean Woodson. I think they're going to be pretty chalky all across the board. We'll get to the Sean Woodson, obviously, but Mike Perry, if anybody's smart and they've been looking at this and they realize Mike Perry should win this fight. He basically beat Vicente Luque in a very close decision. It was a split decision. So, a lot of people thought he won that fight, but that's because the fight was standing up. What happens if he does get put on his back? So we have to give credit to Mickey Gall because Mickey Gall does have some good jiu-jitsu. I just don't know if he can get him there or hold him there or take advantage of it. The one thing that you can think of is the Cowboy Cerrone fight, Jason, is, why did Mike Perry take Cowboy Cerrone down? Nobody will ever know. And then he ended up getting armbarred. So, his fight IQ is not there, and maybe he makes a mistake and Mickey Gall capitalizes.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see, but I believe that Mike Perry's going to be well owned. Of course, this is the UFC Fight Night Poirier versus Hooker DFS strategy show. Of course, we are sponsored by SuperDraft. The future of daily fantasy sports has arrived. Experience SuperDraft's exclusive game mode multiplier. Say goodbye to salary restrictions and hello to lineup freedom. Use your fantasy sports knowledge to draft any player you want and build your very own dream team. Countless lineup possibilities let you experience fantasy sports the way you want. SuperDraft offers contests for PGA, NASCAR, and MMA, and you can enjoy the best of DFS all year round. Sign up for SuperDraft today using the promo code Awesemo12. That is Awesemo12, and it's $10 free on your first deposit of $10 or more and $20 total free on your first deposit of $100 or more. New users also get a free $12 ticket. Download in the App Store or play at superdraft.io. SuperDraft, no limits, more winning. Now, we do have a podcast giveaway, so be sure to check out the pinned tweet on the Awesemo Twitter handle, which is at Awesemo_com, for a chance to win a Awesemo Plus monthly pass. This gives you access to all the premium content, tools, and projections on Awesemo.com for 30 days. All you have to do is subscribe to the Awesemo podcast channel and leave a 5-star review with your Awesemo user or Twitter handle included. It's that easy. One lucky winner will be announced this Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern time. Good luck for those who entered. Of course, if you want a Awesemo Plus MMA weekly pass to get access to all the great Awesemo Plus tools and content for Saturday's DFS slate, get a Awesemo Plus MMA weekly pass for $8.95. This includes full access to Awesemo's leading fighter projection, ownership projections, and the top fighter tool. There's never been a better time for MMA DFS, so step into the octagon today. Of course, one of the free pieces of content you can get up at Awesemo.com is Pete's Sheet that you see right now on the screen. So be sure to check that out. Then next up, we've got a middleweight matchup, a matchup that went through a change last week. It was supposed to be Brandon Allen versus Ian Hainish. Ian Hainish pulled out of the fight due to injury. So Kyle Dawkins, who's going to make his UFC debut, you may remember him from the Contender Series. He's taking on Brandon Allen. Brandon Allen, 9,200 on DK, $18 on FanDuel, 1 times on Superplay. Or SuperDraft, excuse me. Then, of course, Kyle Dawkins, he's 1.5 times on SuperDraft, $12 on FanDuel, and 7,000 on DK. I think when you think of both these guys, Pete, you think of grappling. So we'll lead off here is who's the better grappler?
Okay, so they both have some good jiu-jitsu and some good grappling, and they're both big boys for the 185-pound division. Brandon Allen's 6'2", and Kyle Dawkins is 6'3". Both have pretty long reach as well, 75 inches for Allen, 76 for Dawkins. Now, As far as grappling, I would say that Brendan Allen has the wrestling advantage, and he definitely has the better takedowns. I think that he can put Dawkins on his back. It's just I don't know if he really wants to hang around there because Dawkins is pretty slick with his jiu-jitsu. Off his back, he throws up some attempts of arm bars, triangles. Doesn't seem to have the most like urgency though, but it's there, so he knows what to do. Kyle Dawkins is very good when it comes to Brazilian jiu-jitsu. He's a big southpaw, big lanky guy. So even if it's standing, okay, I could see him looking to keep it at range and try to just pick apart Brendan Allen. As far as this fight goes, I think Brendan Allen at 9,200 is a very, very tough price tag, but it kind of makes sense because he should be able to toss Kyle Dawkins around. If you look at Kyle Dawkins' career, he's getting taken down by a lot of fighters that really aren't even in the 185-pound weight class. And he's constantly having to get up to his feet or reverse positions. And against Brendan Allen, who's very, very savvy and has UFC experience already, it's a tough fight, man. And I just don't know if Brendan Allen's going to be able to put Kyle Dawkins away because Kyle Dawkins is tough. Doesn't look like Dawkins has the best cardio. But in saying that, Brendan Allen's pretty sloppy with transitions as well. If you look at the Kevin Holland fight, there are a lot of reversals, transitions. He's falling off the back. He's going for an armbar, a leg lock. And that's kind of what I expect in this matchup. I kind of expect a sloppy fight, whether it's standing up or on the ground. But I was initially looking at that 7K Dawkins and trying to find somebody, man. You got to find that 7K fighter that you're going to back. And I just couldn't pull the trigger on it.
Oh, I got one.
Okay.
We're going to get to that one in here very shortly. And I think we're going to have a nice little conversation on that one. Do you think the smaller cage benefits either one of these guys?
It's tough to say because the smaller cage in a way favors grapplers. But in saying that, the smaller cage also helps people that are really good at getting back to their feet because you're not, like we said last week, when you get taken down in the big, octagon, it feels like it's forever for you to try to work your way back towards the cage to help you stand back up. Whereas in the smaller cage, next thing you know, you take a couple slides and you push, and then you're right against the cage fence and you can work your way back to your feet. I will have a lineup with Dawkins, and the reason is because he's a big guy. He's super big. He has been training throughout this whole quarantine and everything in hopes of getting a a last-minute replacement fight. And guess what? He got one. But it's a very, very tough task against Brendan Allen. I think Brendan Allen might be, if he's underestimating Dawkins is going to go in there and surprise him because he's huge. And I think one way or another, I'll have a lot of this fight because this is one of the fights I kind of circled. I'll have some Brendan Allen based on the takedown potential and, ground and pound. He's vicious. But if you tell me Dawkins goes in there and pulls off the upset, I'm not completely surprised, but, I'll have a few shares.
You mentioned about the Kevin Holland fight and just kind of give some stats and what you were talking about with the advances, reversals, and all that. So he had 2 takedowns, 2 reverses, 5 advances, only landed 10 significant strikes, and got the submission win in the second round. And of course, he's coming off that win against Tom Breeze. First round TKO victory where he had 2 advances, 20 significant strikes landed, and he scored over 100 points in both of his UFC fights. But he was priced well below the 9,200. He was both under the 8K in his previous fights. I mean, I think the thing is like if you tell me I can only take Mike Perry or Brendan Allen, looking at the favorites, I feel much more comfortable taking Mike Perry.
Yeah, I agree. And it's based on the soft matchup. I don't think that Dawkins is a soft matchup. He comes from a good promotion in CFFC. I like backing guys that come from tough promotions because I feel like they're tested. The only thing with Dawkins is I don't know if he's really tested with a true 185-pounder. Brendan Allen tends to get sloppy and goes out there crazy with his pace. And Dawkins seems like he has a hard time with his cardio as the fight goes on. I mean, on the Contender Series, he had his opponent in, crazy positions of dominance, of full mount and his back, and he was just pitter-pattering because he was exhausted from getting taken down in rounds 1 and 2, and also just that back and forth type of fight. Brendan Allen's a big guy, so I favor him in the matchup. I think that he'll do enough to get it done on the scorecards. Is it the best DFS play? I don't think so. I think there are some other fighters I would, much rather pay down for and spend up elsewhere.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to have a lot of shares in this one. I think I'll have at least one line with Kyle Dawkins. I'll probably have probably 2 or 3 with Brennan Allen, but it's not a fight that I'm targeting. There's other fights in this card that to me are fights that I'm targeting. Of course, be sure to hit that thumbs up button here on YouTube. Of course, that is a fighter, Pete Rogers Jr., on the reporter, Jason Floyd. We will be here on Saturday as well, live before lock, 3:30 p.m. Eastern time. So be sure to check us out, as that show is all about your questions as you make those final tweaks to your lineup, because me and Pete, we're always making tweaks to our lineup pretty much from about Wednesday through about Saturday. Me and him are going back and forth all day long. But we do have a couple of heavyweight matchups on this card. One of those heavyweight matchups is Maurice Greene versus John Galante. John Galante moving up to the heavyweight division. Galante 1.5 times on SuperDraft, $11 on FanDuel, 7,600 on DK. Maurice Greene 8,600 on DK, $19 on FanDuel, and 1.05 times on SuperDraft. I had a chance to talk to Maurice Greene 2 weeks ago. And Maurice is a guy that I've had a chance to talk to on multiple occasions. He's slimmed down a lot over the last year or so. And we saw that, his last fight, particularly when he got on the scale. I forget whether it was the last time I talked to him or the time before that, where he had told me he quit smoking cigarettes, which that was kind of the storyline with him in terms of when he was on the Ultimate Fighter. But really the big news with him is the fact that he left Factory X, went to Jackson Wink. Of course, I brought that question up and just to kind of see what he was going to say. I didn't have anything bad to say about Factory X, basically citing that, hey, they didn't have enough heavyweight fighters there. But, he's living in the dorms at Jackson Wink. I mean, he's been there for at least the last month or so. But I think it's one of these things where we've seen an up and down Maurice Greene in the UFC. So I understand if people don't have a lot of faith in him. John Galante on the other side, I think what concerns me about him is he tends to go to the decision.
Yeah, I mean, I know Green's your boy. For me though, I can't get behind Greene, and that's just me. I feel like every time he's fought in the UFC, I just haven't picked him. Nothing against Maurice Greene. I look at his style and I just feel like he's more of a huge human being than skilled in that division. I feel like his size is what gets, him some victories. Whereas I would much rather play the guy that has, the better skill set. And I know a lot of people are going to hate on John Galante, but I think John Galante is just better. And I think it's a tough matchup for Galante too, because it's his first fight at heavyweight. And, back in April, he was supposed to fight Ben Rothwell. I don't like that fight for John Galante. That would have been probably bad. Significantly undersized against a huge Ben Rothwell. But maybe John Galante was really hurting himself to get to 205. And, weight cutting's tough. And then, making weight shouldn't be the first fight. It should, it shouldn't be detrimental to your performance. And I think we're seeing that more as time goes on, is most people are fighting somewhat closer to what they walk around at. And maybe this is, John Galante is going to be about 235, 245, something around there. So he won't be as big as Maurice Greene. But as far as Maurice Greene, he's a tall, rangy guy who has some good, decent striking, just doesn't throw enough volume, and has some surprising jiu-jitsu. Whereas John Galante has some good boxing, some really good toughness, tends to go to a decision and split decisions more than I think Sam Alvey. And I think that's an accomplishment right there. But John Galante did get dropped by a body shot by Michael Olashechuk in his last performance. So facing a big guy in Maurice Greene with a smart coach behind you and Greg Jackson, you have to think that they obviously saw that fight and are working knees to the body, because I really feel like a knee to the liver could be what ends the show for John Galante. So I'll probably have one lineup with your boy Jason, and it's going to hurt me to say, but for a 7K option, I don't think John Galante is bad because he's tough and he hasn't been hurt or finished by too many people in the UFC. So at 7,600, you're searching for an underdog. I don't think he's a terrible play.
I think the question is, do you think he can win by finish?
That's a good question. Probably, I don't know. But okay, let's look at Maurice Greene, right? His career, 3-2 in the UFC. John Galante 7-8 in the UFC. Maurice Greene, even outside the UFC, when he was, kickboxing for glory, we've seen him get dropped and hurt and rocked and knocked out and finished in the past. And John Galante, I always thought when I looked at him, he has some really, really good boxing with a lot of power, and he has good pressure. I was just watching his previous fight against Ed Herman, and he has great pressure as far as footwork, but he doesn't necessarily put the volume behind it. So he's like always in your face, but he doesn't really throw too much. Maybe the smaller cage favors him here. I think it's hard for me to get behind Maurice Greene, knowing that he's, on back-to-back losses, and I've seen him get cracked before. So I'll have a lineup with you, boy, but this is a fight for the most part I'll probably stay away from.
Yeah, I mean, look, I it's not a fight that I love. And I think it's just because that the confidence you potentially don't have in Maurice Greene, but will we see a much different fighter than we've seen in the past? Thanks to Mike donating there in the super chat. Really do appreciate that, Mike. He says, "Hey guys, I was wondering between these four fighters: Kyle Dawkins, Jordan Griffin, Julian Erosa, and Mauro Romero, least owned, which has the biggest upside / payoff?" Thanks. Well, first off, Mauro Romero is not on this card anymore as Maverick is pulled out of the fight due to injury. The UFC has not given her a new opponent. In terms of the other three fighters that you mentioned and least owned, I would, if I'm ranking them, I will go Julian Erosa, Kyle Dawkins, and Jordan Griffin.
I agree with you. I think the reason Julian Erosa will be the least owned is because he's taking a last-minute fight against Sean Woodson. And Sean Woodson is a mammoth of a human being for the 145-pound weight class. It's pretty insane. I mean, the guy is 6'2" with a 78-inch reach at 145 pounds. I'm 6 feet tall, and I fought at 145 pounds. And this guy has a 2-inch height advantage over me, okay, and a 5-inch reach advantage over me. And I'm a pretty big 45er, not a 45er. But Julian Erosa is 6'1" with a 74-inch reach. So Julian Erosa is usually a huge 45er as well and likes to strike. I think this is right in Woodson's wheelhouse. If you're Julian Erosa, you're sitting here thinking like, okay, I couldn't ask for a better matchup, besides the size discrepancies. Like, I got a guy that wants to stand up with me and doesn't really have too much power, and he's more of a volume type of guy with some fluidity. So I would say in your situation, and for your question, Mike, thank you for the donation. I would say Julian Erosa is probably the least owned fighter.
Yeah, and of course that fight is now on the main card after the changes. Woodson, I think, is going to be a chalk play on pretty much every platform. He is 8,800 on DK, 18 on FanDuel, 1.05 times on SuperDraft. Julian Erosa, no number on SuperDraft, $11 on FanDuel, and 6,800 on DraftKings. This is when they turned to Julian Erosa, when Kyle Nelson had to pull out of the fight because he couldn't get a visa to leave Canada to take this fight here in the U.S. And when I was recording my podcast, and someone texts me and says, "Hey, Julian Erosa ? And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Like, "Oh, apparently he's fighting Sean Woodson." So I'm literally doing my show. I'm texting away, get it confirmed, and I'm surprised that Julian got this fight. Lost 3 in a row, hasn't fought in a year. To me, this is, I think Sean Woodson's a better play in cash than he is GPP.
I would say for cash, he's safe. Yeah, I think that Sean Woodson gets it done. I think that he's the bigger, better striker in this matchup. I think that he has some great fluidity to his strikes. He's starting to really develop that James Krause type of style where it's not a lot of hard strikes, but more volume and more just like methodical switching stances, looking pretty, like really good movement. If you look back at the Kyle Bochniak fight, he really put on a great show there, had a good amount of significant strikes. And the one worry is if he doesn't score well, like if he doesn't really cash too well, if he doesn't get you 90 points, was it a waste? I think that him getting a win is pretty safe. So if you want to like add him to a bet, I think that Woodson getting the victory is very, very safe. As far as Erosa, like Erosa's been dropped by how many people now, Jason, and finished and knocked out by plenty of people. but he's game, and he's going to do what the UFC wants, and that's stand and bang. So, I think that this is more of a let's really just showcase Sean Woodson, for all of our viewers and get everybody behind this kid because they think there's some potential there. And I do believe that there is as well. Plenty of Sean Woodson at 8,800 based on significant strikes and knockout potential because you don't have to hit somebody with a hard shot to finish them. You just got to catch them with a shot they don't see coming or clip them and then finish up with a submission or whatever. TKO, doesn't matter. I like Woodson here at 8,800. I'll have plenty of Sean Woodson, and I think he's safe overall.
You mentioned about his UFC debut against Kyle Bochniak. He landed 111 strikes in 3 rounds of fighting. That's a ton. And should note, both are represented by the same manager. So that makes it very interesting. But, I mean, look, I think Woodson's is going to be a chalk play. I think when we're talking about chalk, it's him and Poirier. I like Sean Woodson to win the fight. My only concern is when you're paying 8,800, is he going to get enough in a GPP lineup that you're going to want?
I don't know. I mean, if you look back, he averages 85.5 DraftKings points with 5 strikes per minute. Going up against Erosa, who absorbs 5 strikes a minute. That's a lot. So I feel like he could go out there and really just, accumulate a lot of damage against Julian Erosa. The thing with Julian Erosa is he's tough, man. Like if he's not facing a power puncher, he tends to survive. And I wouldn't classify Sean Woodson as a power puncher. So for me, I'll pick who I think is going to win the fight in Sean Woodson. And, crazier things have happened in MMA. So good luck trying to predict outcomes. But for me, Woodson is going to get the W.
Over there in the super tip here on YouTube, Mike, really appreciate the donation. He goes, thanks, guys. Frank killed me last weekend. Yeah, he killed a lot of us. He goes, I'm hesitant to go heavy with Woodson, but Kyle seemed like a good play with his background. But I didn't see Max quitting either last week. I mean, look, when you talked about, none of us saw that happen with Max last weekend. You're talking about an NCAA wrestling champion and all his credentials. We didn't see that one coming. We haven't really talked about this one. Obviously, on being a fighter, you corner fighters as well. I think in the heat of the moment, we're all like, man, what the hell is Drysdale doing? This guy's talking about how many times he wants to quit. But then, like, after I must have watched that clip 10, 15 times. And I'm sitting there going, I feel like Drysdale did everything the way you should because, A, he knows his fighter better than anyone else. But then it also got to the point where he did tell the inspector it's done.
Yeah, so, like, there's a fine line of motivating your fighter and trying to give him a pick-me-up and then, making them snap out of the negative thoughts. Because let me tell you, as soon as things aren't going right in the cage, a lot of dark thoughts happen, okay? And that's just natural. And the more experience you get, the more you're able to drown out those dark thoughts or those, that voice in the back of your head. And I think that just goes back to the experience. Max is just a little bit inexperienced, a little bit green. And that's why like an amateur background or, facing tough opponents or, not getting early finishes all the time is a good thing for your career because it tests you. And, I think Drysdale should have tried to encourage his fighter and snap him out of it because he knows it's just all negative thinking. But it comes to a point where it's a little excessive. If the kid doesn't have it, he doesn't have it. And, he's obviously going to regret that. But, you got to do your best as a coach, but you can't be going out there forcing people. So I thought he did a good job. I just wouldn't have gone to that level. You know what I'm saying? Like I probably would have been really, really stern early on to see if I could get him to snap out of it quick rather than being so passive and just saying the same thing over and over.
Yeah, I was listening to McCarthy's podcast this week, and he was talking about he reffed Emmanuel Newton's fight against Linton Vassell, and he's like, Newton has a bad round. He gets back. He's just telling his coaches he just went out, and then Antonio McKee is the head coach. Antonio smacks him.
Yeah, no, honestly, that's honest. That's really not that bad of an idea sometimes because sometimes you just need to really just snap out of that bad thing. You're like, okay, yeah, you're right.
I feel like that's what your dad would do to you.
100%. 100%.
That seems like PC would definitely do that to you. Now we mentioned about there was a fight that we're we're a little different on this one. That's the matchup between Louise Pena and Kama Worthy. Kama Worthy, 7,300 on DraftKings, $11 on FanDuel, 1.5 times on SuperDraft. Louise Pena, 1.05 times on SuperDraft, $19 on FanDuel. 8,900 on Louise Pena. When I'm looking at 7K options and I'm looking at a guy who I think has a chance to get 100 plus points, it's Kama Worthy. Now, look, Kama Worthy is live by the sword, die by the sword. And one of the things he said to me last week when we talked, he goes, look, I feel I'm one of the best strikers. And then I see this MMA Fighting article. I don't know if I sent it to you earlier today or not. And when I saw this article, I go, oh my goodness, I might like Kama Worthy a little bit more. But I'll pull up the article, Pete, here.
Star Wars reference?
Let me, he goes, trying to find it here.
I think Louise
talk about the fight while I find this.
Yeah. So Louise Pena is the A side of the fight. And I really like Louise Pena. I think that his length at 6'3" for the 155-pound division is unheard of. That's unbelievable. He has, a 75-inch reach going up against Kama Worthy, who has a 74-inch reach. I like Louise Pena, man. He's a southpaw, and a lot of people underestimate how tricky it is to face a southpaw, especially somebody that knows how to use their range. And Louise Pena definitely knows how to use his range. He has some smooth boxing, but I think a lot of people aren't bringing this into consideration is his good grappling. And, Kama Worthy could get taken down and just submitted very, very quickly, because that's probably the smart way around the damage or the danger of Kama Worthy, because he's going to throw heat at you. And I think Louise Pena does show that he has a chin on him. If you look at the Matt Frivola fight, you can even look back at a lot of fights. He can take a shot. So Kama Worthy, I think that's his only path to success, is clipping him and hurting him and dropping him. I mean,
agreed.
Yeah, the Devontae Smith fight was crazy. Minus 1,000 favorite gets dropped by Kama Worthy. That's what I'm saying. It's a fight at the end of the day. Anything can happen. For me, I really like Louise Pena at 8,900. I'm going to have plenty of Louise Pena based on his grappling. And I've also seen Kama Worthy get knocked out a lot on the regional scene. And I've seen it firsthand. Because, like you said, live by the sword, die by the sword. And exchange it with somebody who has some good defense and some crisp boxing, and Louise Pena, I think could be a problem. And then you add the wrestling to it in a smaller cage. And, I'm favoring Louise Pena.
I want to bring up this quote. This is from an MMA Fighting article. This is from Louise Pena. I have a feeling we're going to go in there and let it all hang out. It's going to be very technical, very violent, and there's probably not going to be a lot of groundwork. We're going to meet in the middle and see who drops first, I think.
Okay. So for DFS, like, your eyes light up. You're like, oh my God, 7K, and he's saying that. But I don't think, Louise Pena might get cracked or even just barely miss a shot and be like, okay, I'm not striking with this dude, and just take him down and submit him. I really feel like that's what's going to happen. That's the smart thing to do. He's been working with some top coaches down in American Top Team. Like I said, he's been sparring Dustin Poirier. He's been sparring Jorge Masvidal, and the list goes on with all that talent down there. I'm backing Louise Pena big time.
I feel like the key to Pena is closing a distance, not making this a range fight. I think if he makes this a range fight, it tips a hat. But look, and you mentioned, and someone in the chat saying recency bias. Look, there's no recency bias here. I've known Kama Worthy for years, so there's no recency bias in this one. But what I know who Kama Worthy is, Kama Worthy is a guy who's going to go out there and the old Rampage Jackson line. I'm going to throw them bungalows. That is Kama Worthy. He's going to throw some bungalows at you. And that's why I feel like the ATT coaching staff is not the game plan is not going to be, hey, let's go have a brawl against this guy, because that's what he does best. Yeah. Now, yes, does Kama Worthy get caught and dropped? Yes, he does. Does he get taken down, submitted? Yes, he does. But I think the point is, from a DFS aspect, is if you're looking for a low price fighter and you're saying who can win by knockout or submission, Kama Worthy's got to be one of the guys you look at.
Yeah, so what you're saying is absolutely correct. There are some, like I like to do every week, it's like process of elimination. Find the fighters that you really think actually have a chance. If they win, they're going to score big. And Jason's right. With the 7K option, if Worthy wins, he's going to score huge because he's going to get a knockout. Now, there are plenty of other 7K options that don't have that potential, and don't have that, that resume to reference to. And if you look at Worthy, he has 11 finishes in his career. He's 15-6, Jason. So, if you look at the new spreadsheet, I added age, I added UFC record, and I also added finishes for everybody. So you guys can look, and maybe that'll help you out a little bit with your picks. Jason's right as far as a 7K option with upside. I just don't see it happening, so I'm favoring Pena.
Kind of crazy the fact of Luis Pena is 6'3", Worthy's 5'11", and there's only a 1-inch reach advantage for Luis Pena in the fight. Just one of those crazy stats. That's actually a stat that Worthy brought to me when I talked to him last week. Of course, you are watching the UFC Fight Night, Poirier versus Hooker DFS strategy show. We are sponsored by SuperDraft. The future of daily fantasy sports has arrived. Experience SuperDraft's exclusive game mode multiplier. Say goodbye to salary restrictions and hello to lineup freedom. Use your fantasy sports knowledge to draft any player you want and build your very own dream team. Countless lineup possibilities let you experience daily fantasy sports the way you want. SuperDraft offers contests for PGA, NASCAR, and MMA, so you can enjoy the best of DFS all year round. Sign up for SuperDraft today using the promo code Awesemo12, and it's $10 free on your first deposit of $10 or more, and $20 free on your first deposit of $100 or more. New users also get a free $12 ticket. Download in the App Store or play at superdraft.io. SuperDraft, no limits, more winning. And be sure to follow Awesemo on Instagram and Facebook, as we'll be providing free Awesemo Plus player projections for PGA, NASCAR, and MMA, and more on our Instagram page at Awesemo_com and our Awesemo Facebook page daily. So make sure to give them a follow. That the fighter they're going to be featuring this week is Mike Perry. So be sure to check out that. Also, we all know many sports may be on hiatus right now, but Awesemo Plus isn't. Sign up today for a platinum package, which includes access to all of Awesemo Plus projections, tools, and content for PGA, esports, NASCAR, MMA, soccer, and KBO baseball. You can review your membership options by clicking the Awesemo Plus tab in the upper left-hand corner of the Awesemo.com homepage. Be a lot of great stuff up there. Of course, Alex will have all his projections up there, so you definitely want to use that as well. Next up, we got a heavyweight matchup. Philippe Lins taking on Tanner Boser. Tanner Boser, 7,900 on DK, $17 on FanDuel, 1.25 times on SuperDraft. And for Philippe Lins, 8,300 on DK, $15 on FanDuel, and 1.25 times on SuperDraft. This is a fight that I don't think I'll have one share on.
Ooh. Yeah, not my favorite fight, Jason. Philippe Lins, if you don't know who he is, he was over in the organization called PFL and won the heavyweight tournament over there for $1 million. So there's a ton of hype. But how motivated can you be, Jason, when you win $1 million? Like, I don't know. I feel like if you won $1 million, you really wouldn't be that motivated or that hungry. And maybe that's what happened in the Andrei Arlovski fight. And he was fighting a teammate in Andrei Arlovski, and maybe that is why his performance was a little underwhelming. Like he really didn't perform that well. He looked great round one, but his volume wasn't there, and he kind of just got outpointed by Arlovski. In this matchup against Tanner Boser has made a career of outpointing his big opponents, his big, intimidating heavyweight opponents, by leg kicking them, moving around the cage, and just having some decent head movement and footwork. The smaller cage might be a little detrimental to his performance, Jason, because he's not going to be able to move like he's used to. And the smaller cage is really going to press the action. And Philippe Lins, despite the lack of volume in his previous fight, you can't expect the same result going forward. You have to expect that fighters are going to make adjustments. And I listened to a Dan Hooker interview, and he says, I really don't look at my opponent's weaknesses too much because I expect my opponents to fix those weaknesses and work on them. I really like to look at their strengths and work my game plan around their strengths. And I thought that was pretty fascinating. It makes sense. But maybe in this in this instant, Felipe Lins realizes he needs to fix the volume and he really needs to get ahead on the scorecards. So I'm backing Felipe Lins at 8,300. I'll have a share or two because the guy did knock out a lot of people over there at the PFL and in his career. But in the past, he has been finished too, Jason. And, Tanner Bozer's tough. He has okay hands, good leg kicks, weird movement, but tends to blitz forward. And once Andrei Arlovsky was doing that to Felipe Lins had some great counters. So I'm hoping Felipe Lins can pull it together here. Is he great for GPP? Probably not, but at 8,300, I'll take a shot. He's a somewhat underdog. I mean, there aren't too many underdogs I really like on this card, but he's one of the guys that I can get behind.
Yeah, when you look at Tanner Boser, 6 of his last 7 fights have gone the distance. And, it's one of those things for Tanner Boser, the UFC is going to be looking at him saying, look, we need you to get finishes. And you bring up a great point. The small cage definitely is not going to be a big factor for him in that one. Next up, we have got Takashi Soto taking on Romi Bhajami. Bam-Hima. I had it written down because I was watching the video.
Brahima.
That too, yeah. So he's 7,800 on DK, $14 on FanDuel, 1.35 times on SuperDraft. Sato, 8,400 on DK, $16 on FanDuel, 1.2 times. And you got a 4 to 7 May guy. And this is, you got Sato's a striker. We know that.
Yeah.
Submission defense, not good.
No.
He's taking on a submission guy here. So this is one of those fights of it may be a fight that ultimately ends up in the optimal lineup, but if you get it wrong, you might have a fighter with like 10 points.
Yeah, I agree. I'm glad you said that. This is a fight I put a little star next to because I think that Sato does have some UFC experience at 1-1 and some pancration experience. His overall record is 15-3, going up against a fellow newcomer and Raheem Brahima, who's 8-2, making his UFC debut. So UFC debut incident. Who knows how they're really going to respond to everything? But they couldn't ask for a better situation. It's no different than going on the Contender Series. To be honest, they're not dealing with the crowd. They're not dealing with the energy. They're not dealing with all that crazy pressure. It's a different type of pressure because, there's nobody in attendance. But this fight is pretty simple to break down. I think Sato has some really, really good hands, and he's been working with Henry Hooft. Looks really good, on pads and even in his fights. It seems like he really has some knockout ability. So could he end up cracking Brahima as he comes in to try to take him down? Absolutely, because he was really looking for the uppercut against his matchup against Bilal Muhammad. And in that matchup, I saw a lot of things that I think Brahima can do the same. He can really close the distance, get him against the cage, shuck by, take his back, because Sato has a terrible, terrible habit of turning away. Whenever somebody comes in for a takedown, he turns away to fight the hands and basically gives up his back every single time. Even if he gets taken to the mat, his first instinct isn't, get to his elbow or get to his hand and work on cage walking back to his feet. His first instinct is get to his hands and knees in like the fetal position. And when you do that against a guy like Brahima, who's so talented in the grappling department and is really good at taking people's backs and working submissions and is just relentless when it hits the mat. Coming from Fortis MMA, man, I like Brahima as my 7,000 guy that I'll probably have a decent amount of. Now, I won't be pulling the Max Roshkoff or anybody and having so many shares that it's going to destroy my lineups, but I'll have plenty of shares of Brahima at 7,800. I'll have a few with Sato, but I think that the likelihood is Brahima is going to be able to close the distance, take it to the mat, and get it done.
Then we got Jordan Griffin taking on Yusuf Zalal. Yusuf Zalal, 8,000 on DK, $12 on FanDuel, 1.3 times on SuperDraft, 1.25 times for Griffin on SuperDraft, $19 on FanDuel, 8,200 on DK. Obviously, Zalal had a great UFC debut, showed that movement, back in February. He is. I spoke to him on Monday of this week, and he didn't want to take a fight during Ramadan, and so that's why kind of he's in this position, taking this fight here. Took the fight last week, so it is a short notice fight for him. Of course, Griffin was supposed to fight 2 weeks ago when his opponent pulled out due to a failed weight cut. This is a fight that I kind of feel this might be an optimal lineup match.
Well, Jason, usually that 8,000, 8,200 fight is, pivotal for your lineups, especially if you're looking to be optimal. I mean, it's some of the toughest fights to call. And, you have Jordan Griffin, who has really bailed himself out of a lot of bad positions. And he's constantly in bad positions where he's getting taken down and repeatedly, or is fighting off submission attempts, like even outside of the UFC. If you think of his fights with Derek Minner, the guy was getting absolutely dominated and then pulls off this miraculous, victory. And he's done the same thing, against TJ Brown. And, I don't think you're always going to be able to bail yourself out like that. And he has some terrible takedown defense. He's constantly being taken down. And his takedown defense, is 35% going up against a guy who just landed 6 takedowns. Youssef Zalal. I really like Zalal here. I think Zalal's movement on the feet can avoid the big shots of Griffin. I think that Zalal's smart enough to not get caught with anything tricky that Jordan Griffin can throw at him. Like, because Jordan Griffin has a great guillotine, but Zalal can outpoint him on the feet, dance around him, get some good positions and hold him. I would imagine. And Griffin, he's just comfortable, hunting for submissions off of his back, but if you don't get the submission win, you're going to lose by points. And that's just, the reality of it for jiu-jitsu and MMA. On your back, you're losing. So I like Zalal a little bit more than Griffin. I guess I'll have one lineup with Griffin, but I'll have plenty with Zalal at 8,000.
Opening fight of the night is a female matchup that was, I want to say, added over the weekend. I want to say Kay Hansen, 8,500 on DK, $15 on FanDuel, 1.2 times on SuperDraft, taking on Jin Yu Frey, 1.5 times on SuperDraft, $11 on FanDuel, 7,700 on DK. And this is one that, you're gonna laugh at me again here. First fight of the night, Jason's might have a good amount of shares in a fighter.
With who? Let me hear.
Kay Hansen.
Okay, cool. All right, cool. We're on the same side.
I don't like, Jen moving up to 115. When you look at, she's an atomweight fighter.
Yeah.
I think that's the one thing I really look at of her stepping up a weight class. Is she also just going to be big enough?
Yeah. It's a great point. I have some insiders that, gave me some little tips on Invicta. And, I went back and I looked, for myself to see the film. And the one thing about Kay Hansen is she has some incredible takedowns. And I really have to give her credit with that. She has some great takedowns, some great top pressure. But she does seem to get, reversed a little bit and doesn't seem to have the best control sometimes. Like, if people are scrambly and wiry, they can get back to the feet, but she'll just keep taking it down. Like, this girl kind of has like Marab side, type of takedowns where she's just getting like 5 or 6 takedowns a fight. Jin Yu Frey is very, very tough. She's very strong as well, but she's coming up a weight class. And I feel like there's a lot of hype behind her. She's very good standing up. She throws bombs, dude. Like, she has some great power for an atom weight now, 115-pound fighter. But she throws a ton of kicks, right? Kicks are a huge part of her game, Jason. And let me say, Kay Hansen specializes in catching kicks and using those kicks to take you down. Like, she gets you, that's how she closes the distance. She waits for you to throw a leg kick inside or outside, and she really just presses forward with that and takes you down because of it. And I really feel like Jin Yu Frey is just like so accustomed to throwing so many kicks that she's going to end up getting taken down. She may be strong enough to get back to her feet, but it's just going to be rinse and repeat, I would say. Kay Hansen doesn't want any part with Jin Yu Frey striking because Jin Yu Frey throws bombs standing up. So if Jin Yu Frey can keep it standing, there's some potential that she could actually clip and hurt Kay Hansen on the feet and finish her. I'll have plenty of Kay Hansen because I feel like she's going to win more times than not, but I'll have a lineup of Jin Yu Frey in case it stays standing.
So do want to finish up the DFS strategy show here by answering a listener question YouTube chat that we've not gotten to. Mentioned about this question from Cameron earlier in our show, our best underdog option. So Pete, as I look down here, if you tell me I got to take one underdog to win, man, one underdog.
Do you
Who?
see why I'm favoring Hooker in this matchup, like for DFS wise? Because like the underdogs are tough.
Yeah, I mean, John Galante. I think if he wins, I think it's probably by decision.
Yep.
Could get if Colin Worthy wins, it's by stoppage. If Colin Worthy wins, it's by stoppage in the first round. Um, Bozer leans is Tanner Bozer is actually a slight favorite. At least, well, it's different odds across the way, but it's essentially a pick 'em fight. Uh, Raheem at 115, I think he might be my favorite underdog. I mean, Jordan Griffin right now is an underdog at plus 105.
Yeah, I would agree. I'd say that Brahima is probably one of my favorite underdogs next to Dan Hooker. And I just think it's a lot for Poirier to overcome with his surgeries and everything and first fight back from Khabib. And I like the momentum behind Dan Hooker's gym. So for an underdog play, I don't think it's a bad play. It's a close fight. It really is.
Arturo asked for our picks. So these are just our straight picks. This is not DFS aspect. This is just straight picks. I will go Dustin Poirier, Mike Perry, Brandon Allen, Maurice Greene, Louise Pena, Philippe Leans, Sean Woodson. Give me Brahima, Hansen, Zalal.
All right. I'll go I'll mix it up. I'll go Hooker, Perry, Brendan Allen, Galante, Woodson, Pena, Leans, Brahima, Zalal, Hansen.
Frank says, will Hooker's calf kicks come into play given Poirier's front leg heavy boxing stance?
Yeah, so it's a great point. Justin Gaethje used that a lot against Dustin Poirier. And the one thing that people don't realize is that, Dustin Poirier is a southpaw, so you can't really calf kick him the way that you would calf kick an orthodox fighter with his power leg. So, Dan Hooker's power leg is his right leg. He could throw the inside leg kick, but it's not necessary. It's not nearly the same as an outside calf kick. Outside calf kicks seem to be horrible. Inside leg kicks are definitely terrible as well. You wonder how Dustin Poirier can really handle those kicks. I don't know which leg of his was bad and he had surgery on with his hip, but you take that into consideration that Dan Hooker's not going to outbox Dustin Poirier. Let's be honest. Dustin Poirier is so good. He'll probably jab him up a little bit, hit him with a couple straight right hands. But besides that, he should really be looking at his kicks to be the difference here.
Ty says, with his usual weekly question, cash score and value plays for FanDuel.
Okay, FanDuel. Oof. I wish I played more FanDuel. Man, I don't like too many underdogs. I think Philippe Leans on FanDuel at $15 is pretty nice. I think Zalal at $12 is nice. Brahima at $14 is nice. Whoever you're favoring in the main event, they are priced up. Perry at $20 isn't bad as well.
Next up, Cameron says Lins or Hansen.
I think I'd have to say Hansen in that scenario, Jason, based on I like both of them, but Felipe Leans in his last fight didn't put it all together under the lights, and he didn't really have the best volume. So say he did win that decision against Andrei Arlovsky, he would have had about 50 or so points. Now, that's not really the best score at all, especially when you're 8,300. Now, I think that Kay Hansen could take her down a lot and potentially submit her because she does train, under Eddie Bravo, 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu. But I think it's going to be a decision, and she's just going to get a ton of takedowns and hopefully some advances and transitions.
Next up, Ty's asked, who's our top FanDuel MVP spot?
I think you got to look at Mike Perry. I think if Mike Perry wins, he's not going to submit Mickey Gaul. He's either going to win a decision or he's going to knock him out, and he's going to win a decision by punching him in the face a lot. And that's really how I think it's going to go. And FanDuel favors strikers. So Mike Perry over there, it's like a striker's paradise. You need to have the main event as well. I think the safe thing to do is always put the 5-round fight in your MVP spot in case it goes, the distance. If you look at what Curtis Blades did last weekend, that's a situation where you could be on the outside looking in if you don't have him in that captain spot.
And we're going to leave on this question from FK Coolers. Gaul is a decent underdog just because the times he wins, he probably is in the optimal via early submission win.
Could happen. Nothing's impossible, and you can't count anybody out because you really don't know what's going on in their head. And it's a fight. One bad slip up, you slip on the canvas, and a guy just, he scrambles on top of you. And next thing you know, you're on the bottom eating shots or getting submitted. So it's crazy. I would say that's not a likely scenario. I think Mickey Gall is a long shot play for sure. I won't be having any shares. I know it's hard to back a guy who's being cornered by his girlfriend and has no coaches, but I really feel like Mike Perry can do enough to survive Mickey Gall's attempts and then just punish him.
Brady needs to be in your corner next fight.
That ain't ever happening.
But it's something to mention about Mickey Gall. I mean, you look at his first 3 fights where he got 100 points each one. Mike Jackson, CM Punk, Sage Northcutt. Then he scored 20 points against Randy Brown, which was a decision loss. Then he got a first-round submission against Sullivan. Then the TKO loss against Diego Sanchez. And his decision win his last time out where he got 63 points. But, yeah, look, if Mickey's winning the fight, it's going to be via submission. I mean, if you tell me Mickey Gall straight up knocks out Mike Perry, I would be shocked.
I wonder what that line is. I wonder what it is. It's got to be like plus 1,000 or something is insane. For me, anything can happen in this sport, but I like to put logic behind it and the most likely scenarios. So the most likely scenarios, Perry does enough to get the job done and potentially finishes Mickey Gall.
Plus 1,400. Gall to win by TKO KO.
All it takes is one shot, Jason. I mean,
that's just a crazy number. But of course, we will be here on Saturday live before lock. Of course, if you ever have any DFS questions, be sure to hit Pete up on Twitter at Pete the Heat MMA. I am at Jason_Floyd. As I mentioned, we'll be here back on Saturday afternoon for live before lock. So that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the Awesemo.com MMA DFS strategy show.